Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Ontario Heroes, and welcome to our gathering tonight on strategic organisational development in the non-profit sector. My name is Martin Delau. I'm a volunteer at Ontario Heroes. A little bit about myself. My education and formative years were in Australia and New Zealand. Once my schooling is finished, I did postgrad work in Australia in philosophy and psychology, and I went into counselling. I did some chaplaincies in hospitals, palliative care, youth, schools, and also for the aged. And when I came to Canada, I started focusing a bit on spiritual direction. So I did a master's at U of T in spiritual direction and world religions and ministry. And after a period of time, I began to focus on youth and children. And what really changed that was my experience of working in a residential home. I completed a registration as a psychotherapist, as well as doing addiction counseling. I'm pretty passionate about working with children and youth, and that's been really my main focus. So I'm married with 4 children. So just to give you a brief, that's myself. So just to give you a brief overview of tonight, I'm going to briefly introduce Rita Vince, who is the chair of Ontario Heroes. And then we have a first guest speaker, Ruby Sahota, who is the MP for Brampton North. And our second guest speaker is Dr. Thomas. And then Chris Lamanel will be our moderator for tonight, and Praveen will give closing remarks at the end. So just allow me to then introduce Rita Vince. She's an insurance broker at Benson Kearney IFG, a mother of 2 grown children. And her goal is really to provide a greater understanding in the world of insurance to the world out there. She has had a serious accident, and with insurance, that's really helped her to understand it and try to convey that message out to the wider world. She got into insurance 13 years ago, working with the RBC Insurance for 11 years. And she does auto and life insurance. She has worked for Desjardins, and she realizes that life has so many variables that the importance of life insurance is really an important factor for all to consider. So anyone interested in selling a little bit here for Rita, anyone interested in home and auto insurance, she is the person to go to. So Rita, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you very much, Martin, for such a lovely introduction. I just wanted to take the time to thank everyone for such dedication to giving back to the community. I met Praveen many years ago, and he told me about his vision of Ontario Heroes and all the people who have helped him to make this a reality. Everyone has, thank you, Martin, I see you now. Everyone has a passion for giving back. Ontario Heroes are members from a diverse community and come together for one goal of community giving, sharing knowledge, and mentoring. Ontario Heroes consists of many people: social workers, students, lawyers, accountants, media people, nurses, physiotherapists, practitioners, dietitians, banking staff, realtors, and many, many more occupations. With COVID-19, there has been a lot more anxiety for the future. People are affecting their mental health more so than ever. Working longer hours, the COVID numbers are going up, as we all know, and at the point of lockdown again in certain areas, and we're in for a very long winter. Hopefully the winter's not too cold. We also have many seniors who are isolated in their rooms at the moment, students from around the world who cannot go home to see their families because of, the isolation when you get to one place and the isolation when you come back. People cannot afford a lawyer, but may need help for many reasons. So Ontario Heroes will be their area where they can go to get some free advice. People are having, are having troubles with children and addiction and mental health, and they don't know who to turn to. And since, I know of people that have lost people from addictions and didn't know where to turn to, having someone to talk to and, and going through it with them. Many families don't even know how to do their taxes. They come to Canada, they don't speak the language. They try to go to Liberty Tax or something, but they need some help from somebody. So Ontario Heroes will help them with that too. Learning to eat while you're, having dietitians and learning how to eat healthier and losing the weight. When people become very obese, often they have depression. So having somebody to help you with that will help, society. Having a diverse group is so important to having many languages so people can get help. I often have worked with people that speak many languages, and it helps to have somebody to translate to them. I'm very glad to be a part of seeing Ontario Heroes develop, and the group what it has to give back is just amazing. I thank everybody for all their time. You all have very, very big careers. Martin, you have 4 children. That's a lot of children to take care of. I've seen my sister with 5 children, so I know what it's like, right? All you're giving back and to everybody. And I think it's just amazing that it all got together. And I want to thank everybody. And Martin, I'll put that back over to you.
Thank you very much, Rita. Thank you for your kind words. So allow me then to introduce Dr. Agnes Thomas. She's the Executive Director of the CCS. She's a leading community development practitioner and academic with a passion for social justice issues, community building, and organizational transformation. In this role, Agnes is committed to working with a broad scope of stakeholders to build consensus collaboratively, deliver change, and drive impact for the 30,000 clients served by CCS's suite of programs and services. Agnes served in the non-for-profit sector for more than 2 decades, locally and internationally, in various capacities and leadership roles, including at various L'Arche communities around the world, and the Young Street Mission, and the Jane Finch Family and Community Centre in Toronto. She is also a research associate with the Ontario Institute for Studies and Education at the University of Toronto, and serves on a member of non-for-profit boards in Toronto. She has also appeared frequently as a guest lecturer and conference presenter, and has an extensive body of research and published work. Her passion for advocating for the rights of marginalized groups led her to complete and receive her doctorate in adult education and community development with an award-winning thesis from the university. She has a Master's of Arts degree in Critical Disability Studies from York University, a diploma in social development from the Coady International Institute, St. Francis Xavier University, and a Bachelor of Arts from the Mahatma Gandhi University. Agnes, I hope I did you credit, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Martin. So great to be here. As I was listening to you, I wondered if you did your master's spiritual direction at St. Michael's. I teach a course there now for the interfaith.
Oh, yes, I did, but this was when I had hair on my head.
That's so wonderful. Such a great group, as Rita just said. It is about giving, and it is about volunteering, and it's really about addressing social isolation and reaching out to people who are left out. And I think more than ever, 2020 with COVID, this has become such a significant challenge for people who are in the margins. So this work is transformative, and I think it is going to be significant. Big, bold step. Kudos to you guys, Praveen, and all the members who are present here. And I am just so glad, and I feel such a great privilege coming to present with you today. So what I'm going to do, since it is a dry session, what I would recommend, we will go through it. So I'm going to just talk about 3 aspects of organizational development. And for reference, I do have a PowerPoint that I'm going to share with you. And so first we will look at governance, which is board and board development. So for organizations without a governing body, sustainability or oversight is difficult. And then the second piece for the organization, it is strategic planning, because that gives the direction to the organization. And the third piece is operation. And so what I'm going to do, given we have an hour, I'm going to take 15 minutes for each of the sections. And then towards the end, we have 15 minutes for questions and answers. But in between, if there is anything that comes up, again, chat, I am imagining Chris is going to point out if there are questions for me in the chat or otherwise. So let us begin. Again, thanks for having me here. It's a huge topic. I must say that this is like a 5-hour session, and with follow-up sessions that I'm trying to do, I've squeezed it into a 1-hour session. And me as an educator, I always put forward the first thing as a learning goal. What are we trying to achieve today in the next hour? It is governance, strategic planning, operation, and differentiating roles and responsibilities. And you will see what I mean by that. And important points to consider in developing an organization, because you are at the beginning stage, and some of it is probably premature that what I'm going to present, but bear with me, this will come handy later. And after the presentation, I will share the PowerPoint if people would like with Praveen, and so he can share it forward to you. So we will begin with what is governance. It's literally what we are doing right now, a group of people coming together, or a society organizing together within themselves to make decisions. And it is also creation of a system in which people are taking and moving forward with a direction in which there is accountability, control, and management from outside. Because in governance, you have an external role more than an internal role. And you will see how that is different. Again, I tried to come up with simple definitions, but this is not, that's why at the beginning I said it's dry language, but bear with me, there are operation part is a little bit more easier. And I tell you why sometimes people get from governance to operation so easily, because governance is difficult to be focused on, so you would get into operation. And that's one of the challenge that you see often with board and operation. And governance is a system and process, not a single activity, and therefore successful implementation of a good governance strategy requires a systematic approach. And that incorporates strat planning, risk management, and performance management. And we will get to that. Again, you have resources and the links are here that you can use. So what does a governing body or a board does in the not-for-profit sector? So they set the direction for the organization, make strategic decisions, evaluate the performance. So when you're talking about evaluating the performance, we are thinking about the overall performance. So one of the key difference sometimes for board members to remember from the general membership, in this case, you don't have hired staff. Even then, it is so important. Let us say you have a director of finance or a director of HR. And if a board chair decided tomorrow that I want to talk to the HR and give her some guidance, that will be inappropriate if it is not already consulted or without the permission or knowledge of the ED or the executive director or the CEO. So again, we will talk about titles, etc. later. So that is how it works. And so the performance means like, so the ED or the CEO will be reporting into the board. And by that, and then when you do the strategic planning, also there are ways to measure. At the same time, the board also has responsibility and accountability. Let us say if you are like our organization, we are a $13 million organization, and we receive funding from all various levels of government, and we receive funding from smaller foundations. So we are accountable to all of that. Although I oversee the operation part of it, it is ultimately, let us say if there is like some type of fraud or some type of money loss or something that happened that was not done properly, it falls on the board. So that is where a financial checking and accountability piece comes very important. Same thing goes for transparency. If you are to receive or fundraise monies, public would want to know where that money is going and how it is spent. So there are ways and mechanisms and process in place to make sure, and that is where there is a financial audit in the end of the year, and that is published usually publicly. And so it's a public document where people can see what are the transactions of an organization. So in one situation where, or there are a number of situations where board needs to see a transaction, which is if the organization, let's say tomorrow, Ontario Heroes are buying a property, then the board takes the oversight of it. With the ED or the CEO, you will decide together. So that is not an operational discussion. It is, yes, people who are in the management are discussed and shared ideas, but the final decision falls on the board. And same goes for risk management. So any decision the organization makes, board has the responsibility for oversight to see if this is going to be a risk internally or externally. And risk, again, is a total different session altogether, because risk, there are various types of risk. There is performance, there is financial, there is PR, because we are in times, there is social media and all other things are in, like people can make a statement that can become an overnight issue and that can influence the name and status of the organization. So, and we are seeing that always and every day. And so, again, that's another session altogether, but risk is a huge piece that falls under board governance. So again, probably from that you saw why good governance is important. It provides good foundation for a successful organization, builds and keeps the stakeholder confidence in the organization. Let us say if the board is not performing well, and if the governance process is not going well, I know organization got shut down because the board was not working well, because that affects the confidence the community have on the organization. Right, and it ensures organization is well placed to respond to changes and challenges. For example, if I could use one of our current situations, so COVID is not something none of us ever imagined. So we had to come up with a plan immediately in March when the announcement came, and so we went completely virtual. Today, just before I joined the call, we had to again make an announcement that we are going to shut down and everything is going to be virtual. Because Toronto and Peel are going to be in shutdown. So when that happens, board is informed immediately. So this is what we are doing, so that they know. And so that is another, so this is where you need to have good committed board members who are committed to the vision and mission of the organization. As Rita mentioned earlier, these are people who have knowledge, people who can take the time to think about those things. And I will talk about board selection in a second when I talk about the, so board or governance structure is like this, where there is a chair, and it is elected by the board for a set term. It could be 2 years, it could be 1 year or 3 years. It's according to your bylaws. And towards the end of the presentation, I am providing you with links that will give you clear direction and templates for how to develop a bylaw, how to follow Non-Cooperation Act in Canada or in Ontario. So I have all the links in there so you could use. And so the chair usually speaks on behalf of the organization, just like the way Rita started the conversation as we began. So that's something that the chair does. And the chair also leads the executive committee. And so the executive committee is the chair, the vice chair, secretary, and the treasurer. And so if you don't have a treasurer, right now, it may not be an issue, but it is going to be a key piece of governance and board structure. And the vice chair is someone who supports the chair as well as do nominations or hiring and do oversee a little bit of the governance committee. So there are boards have various committees. So, and that is also again need to be defined by the bylaws. So the executive committee I already mentioned, there is a board chair, there is a vice chair, secretary, and the treasurer. And the executive committee has the authority to make decisions between meetings. And in almost all committees, the CEO or the ED is a ex officio member. So they are, you can sometimes meet without, but it is, they are welcome to join the meeting anytime you set one. And then the finance committee, that's again a must committee in any board. The treasurer chairs the committee and it provides financial oversight for the organization. Again, I wanted to emphasize, they're not to look at every little transaction that happens in an organization. What they do, so in our case, we have quarterly financial statement review and approved by the board. So finance committee gets a financial, monthly statement. They look at it, but there is no, it's not discussed every month unless there is a huge change or fluctuation in which that is covered under my report. If that's not the case, every quarter, again, you can decide that upon with your bylaws, it gets discussed and reviewed so that you have good oversight, and that's done by the treasurer. So earlier I mentioned, when we are structuring the board, it's so important to have people who have relevant experiences. So usually a board is made up of people who have accounting experience, people who have legal background, people who have I think I already hear, Rita has insurance experience. So, there is liability insurance, there is all type of things that goes into it. And so you need to have the right skill matrix. And you need to keep checking that every year that you are meeting all those. And that is where usually there is a nominating committee. So they do the recruitment in collaboration with the CEO. And it is all these three would ensure a smooth running of the board. And then again, we have, for example, in our organization, we had a program committee and we have a fundraising committee. You can have whatever committees that you need. For example, I would think, I haven't heard anything about your fundraising or anything, but if, let us say you're going into fundraising, it is good to have a board member who have a little bit of fundraising experience and to have a committee that will advise. Again, hear me, if the organization is doing an event, its board is informed, they can join if they like to. Otherwise, it is quite separate from how they oversee. Overseeing versus micromanaging, because that can run you into trouble later if you don't, because there are two types of boards. There is a policy governance board or there is operational board. In this case, at this point in time, probably Ontario Hero is in a place that you all are doing a little bit of everything. And that is so normal when you begin an organization. But once you are established, the roles needs to be very clear and there needs to be a process in place. And so if you don't have the bylaws yet, I would highly recommend you work on the bylaws. Because that bylaws are the internal document that is where you're going to, oh, what are the rules? Who is following what rule, right? And so the federal government, how relevant legislation, which I have shared on this later slide, like the Canada Not-for-Profit Incorporations Act, and then we have Ontario Corporations Act. So that is your go-to document for external insights, and like it's so detailed. It's 192 pages because I did, I serve on other boards, and so time and again you look through these things when things comes up. So for internally, what needs to be developed? Articles, which kind of says purposes, objects of the organization, etc., and then policies and procedures. So there is a difference between policies and procedures.
What are they?
Policies are usually approved by the board. It may be developed by the operations group, but approved by the board. It needs to be reviewed, and some needs to be reviewed once a year. So it all depending on where you are at. And procedures or procedural manuals are supposed to be operational document. Let us say if I'm to use an example, you are going to hire a person in the senior management. In that case, you have procedures that helps you achieve that. And you may inform the board after, hey, here I have, or we have hired the senior management position. And sometimes board can request, hey, can I sit in? Because if this is an important role and it's at the beginning, it is good, but again, it is requested. It is not expected, or it is not, you don't push your way into those type of operational decisions. And so that is a little bit of the committees on the board, and then a sample agenda for board meetings. Again, people do it organically, but some of the things are very important to pay attention to. For example, you need to take minutes for each of the board meetings. Sometimes external, let us say if you receive funding from certain bodies, they may request you to share the minutes. So again, you don't just say Rita said this and Martin said this, none of those, it is not that detailed. You would state facts, what get approved, what kind of questions being raised. So it's more of a objective type of writing, not subjective writing. In other words, you don't have a meeting minute that is 10 pages long, but you would have something a little bit more concise. And so in the meeting, usually after the approval of the minutes, so you have the chairperson's report. In some cases, there are no report from the chair and they move to the ED's report, or which is why I keep saying executive director's report. So in the common language in the sector, although it is changing now, it is used like the executive director is a term that is used for the CEO. Like so CEO is a corporate entity title, but it is changing, and it is a lot of organizations are moving into that. It is exactly the same, but you would see in the not-for-profit language, executive director is commonly used. And so after the ED report, and so it is usually provided in writing, and you would send that a week or whatever arrangement the board agreed to. It could be just a summary of all things that is happening, and if there is anything outstanding that the board needs to know. Then the committee reports, if there are committees. and then items need approval from the board. So if I'm to use an example of an item that need approval from the board, let us say the CEO, the ED is deciding to add a new holiday to the existing HR policy, or buying a new insurance, or it is a financial statement that needs to be approved, that is brought forward at that time. And sometimes people come up with new ideas, and that needs to be matters under discussion or new matters. So that is where that gets decided, then the meeting adjourned. But again, we would have to remember only policy items require board action. No board action is required when the committee chair is simply providing information. And another thing is, at the beginning of the meeting, usually the chair asks if anybody have any other items to be added. So those are just the regular procedures. So before I go to strategic planning, does people have any questions, or we are okay to go to strategic planning and then look at the questions later?
I think, Dr. Agnes, we are okay to continue. I don't see questions as yet.
Okay, so yeah, I would then ask just a couple of questions. So what is the primary difference between board and ED roles? So again, I mentioned hiring and firing a program supervisor or an HR director or a finance director falls under ED's or the CEO's decision. Approval of the annual budget, it is developed by the finance team in the operations, but it is approved by the board, and it has to be always approved by the board. It is never an operational decision. The same goes for an HR policy. It is developed or recommended by the operations group, unless there are specific expertise at the board level that they can do it in collaboration. But it is reviewed and approved by the board all the time. So those are the kind of things, a primary difference between the ED and the CEO and the board, because they do not involve in operation things, which is day-to-day stuff. And segregation of duties are so important when you think of that. For example, again, conflict of interest, trust, all that is so key pieces for the board members to declare if there is a conflict of interest. When you come in and you have an idea you wanted to impose, that is a conflict of interest and you have to declare. Or you promise somebody something external and say, oh, through Ontario Heroes that I will get that done. That is a conflict of interest unless it is discussed and approved by the entire board and the ED. So there are little things we take it for granted or take it easy are not supposed to be, and it can land us into trouble and possible dismissal from the board because these are serious issues. And also misrepresentation is also, I mean, again, when you go into the act, which I have already provided the link, you will see those specifics and what it means and how you respond to certain situations. So one of the major responsibility of a board is strategic planning. And so strategic planning is an organizational management activity that is used to set priorities, focus energy and resources, strengthen operations, ensure that employees and other stakeholders are working toward common goals. So always what you need to remember about strategic plan is that it is again the overarching goal. It has to be in alignment with the mission and vision of the organization. Let us say if your vision or the mission is to serve people in healthcare, and then your strategic planning says that we are going to organize all the informal or cash workers in Toronto, those are entirely two different things. So even if it is a great idea and it serves the community, you are moving so far away from your mission and vision. And that is something when you're setting up a strategy for the organization, you have to keep checking if that is in alignment with your goal and mission. Otherwise, this will go down the rail and it can be destructive for the organization. So why strategic planning? It outlines a clear direction for your organization, bring focus and clarity to the work, create opportunities for reflection, and builds capacity. So what I mean there, so sometimes we can get into this mode that, oh, we are doing this and we all know what we are doing, so why do we need anything? And so this COVID situation is a great example how this tests our capacity and will to move forward or change, or we die. So this type of a good strategic plan allow us to reflect if we are on the right path, if we need to tweak something as a result of it. So last year, we didn't imagine we will be providing services virtually. This year, this is the reality. And so how is that reflected in our overall objectivities, our activities and objectives, right? And this is where sometimes, even if you have a set strategic goal or a plan, you would check with the ED, is it still relevant given there is a significant change? So then as a board, you look at it, and always the ED's function is that they check in and consult with their team leads, the directors or the managers or the supervisors. How is that relevant to the community we serve, right? So there is checking and participation from all levels. But you get to hear that mainly from the ED in terms of, okay, this particular goal is not working, but instead we need to put in IT as a, or partnership building as another goal. See, that is how this works. And when you have a very good strategic planning process done, it ensures operational efficiency because your goals are set very clear. People know what they're supposed to do. Leaders are ready and it is proactive. It's never reactive when a strategic planning process is well done because you move into things smoothly. You are not all of a sudden, no, what are we doing now? You know, that set everybody on a bad path. So then how we do strategic planning? So it's a long process. It's not simple, straightforward. I would think, just given the little history that I know of Ontario Heroes, probably this is where you're going next, unless you already have a strategic plan in place. So you need to check, do an assessment of where you are as an organization. So you have arrived here, and where are we now? And what are some of the emerging themes, issues, challenges that you want to tackle in the next few years? So usually a strategic direction is for 3 years, and some organizations do it for 5 years. In your case, I would say 3 years probably is better than 5 years, given you're still new. And also building space for tweaking and changing things as you move forward. How you do that is every 6 months or so, check in if this is where it is going. Are we achieving the goals or activities that is set? And it is always done. So board is basically, it is usually the initial stage is consulted with the staff team and with the community we are intending to serve or already serving. So what are we hearing? What are some of the things that they would like to see Ontario Heroes achieved? And then come all that together and bring, and usually use, sometimes organizations are not in a place to develop their own or conduct their own strategic planning process. In that case, there are volunteers, consultants who can do this for you. For example, in Toronto, there is a huge consultancy called MAS. They all are retired executives. They support not-for-profit sector free of cost to develop strategy planning, do risk assessment, etc. So that's a huge support. So there are resources available in the city for this type of process. The main theme thinking about strategic plan is coming out with a very clear goal and not 20 goals. You're not going to achieve that. So what is achievable? What is attainable? And then break that down to 6 months, 1 year, and have a system in place to measure it. So I put set SMART goals, which is specific, measurable, action-oriented, and time-specific. So if you don't have any of that, it is difficult. And to have the STAR approach. And then, develop a plan to achieve the objectives. What do you want to achieve with that goal? Goal is a bigger overarching theme. Then how do you make that into smaller pieces? And then who is doing what? So this is where for beginners, like Dario Hero's case, sometimes it can be confusing. So when you are discussing goals, you would have to be practical in approaching it as, okay, this is a volunteer group and people taking time out of their, outside their daily routines and work and responsibilities. So what is achievable and what is measurable? And same time, you need to have key performance indicators to see if we are moving, we are progressing into something. And right now, I don't know if you have a budget. We do need to have, anytime you are setting a goal and a plan, you need to see budget-wise if that is doable. And what can be achieved without a budget? And if it is with a budget, what are some of the resources we can look into? So those are just things for you to consider. And once the strategic plan is done, it is communicated widely. And you roll out the plan with timelines. Sometimes funders, in our case, they would ask, can you share your strategic plan? Not every detail of it. I don't need to share that what one of the team is doing the next month, but like the 4 overarching themes for the year. Can you share that? So for one example of a goal could be diversifying or developing a fundraising plan, or developing a fundraising team, or develop a certain number of, fund development can be one goal. And so then you would give a timeline and then train people in it. This is where a fundraising committee, or depending on the type of goal you set, you would have a committee that helps support that. And for each of these, make sure to have an evaluation plan. So that is a little bit of the strategic plan process. Again, consult. It is a participatory approach. Board does not come up with a strategic plan on their own. They consult. It is tested and it is presented back to see if that is where we are going, and do a SWOT analysis. Strength, weakness, opportunities, threat analysis to see if that is relevant and how it is applicable to your mission and vision. And that is how you always test to see if you are on track. Okay, so we are moving into operation next. So operation is where probably you're going to develop. I know some of it is already done, but in general, operation is a huge piece of the central piece of an organization, where the strategic planning and governance are almost like the umbrella over the operation. So operation is, if I am to use an example of a house, so the governance or the governing body is more like the roof. So the operation represent the rooms. So if so the different pieces. And so that is where, just like the way I'm just using the analogy of the house. So kitchen has a particular function and particular seating arrangement and particular furnitures that may not look right or fit right in the living room. Same way in operations, you have very specific need to develop job descriptions, task assignment, duties and responsibilities to be defined. Otherwise, what is Rita doing and what is when everything is well, it may be fine. But if there is an opportunity for conflict, then it becomes an issue. So then it becomes such a huge mess that it is difficult to manage. And having an organizational chart helps to see who is where and who is reporting to who. And it's more than the hierarchical piece, it just brings clarity to the structure. Just like the way, as I mentioned, it's good for the family to know where the kitchen is or where the kitchen is going to be, then assuming this is where it is going to be. And scope of each roles. This is very important, scope of each roles. So if the HR person is going to, this is an example I'm using, let us say if you have a program director, and if the program director is going to be making the decisions for hiring, it is going to be a difficult communication process for the CEO. Or if the CEO is involved in every frontline staff hiring, it is really not where they should be spending their energy. So this is where roles and scope need to be defined. I mean, sometimes and wherever it is possible, it can be collaborative, it can be a collective approach to leadership. However, at some point, somebody needs to make a decision. And that is where we have somebody appointed as the ED or the CEO, or there is a board to support that person. And so when you start receiving funding, it becomes all the more detrimental in how you would move forward, who is making those decisions and how it is done. So the decision-making process can be collective. Again, you should know where it stops and how it is done. And then there are some roles that are central. For example, if you are to write a check for something, let us say I'm just making this number up, like a $5,000 check to a certain group, it is not signed by your frontline person or your manager. It needs to be signed by the ED. And in our case, if I'm to use our example, we have a certain number set that an amount above that, all of our checks are signed by 2 people. And so those are the kind of procedures you need to develop for good functions and accountability. So, for example, if I'm to use, a finance director will not sign checks for the organization because they are managing and doing the oversight of the finance. So it will be a segregation. You have to think about the segregation of duties in order to protect the integrity of the organization and to avoid conflict of interest. And you need to set certain limits of who interacts with what decision and at what point of contact. You know, if you are entering into partnerships, what type of partnerships can be signed by a program person or a HR person versus the CEO. And usually any organization of whatever size usually have, either you have a consultant or even volunteer human resources team, because you do need to hire people, you do need to train people, and sometimes, unfortunately, you need to fire people. And so that is where you need to have, even if you don't have an HR team, you need to have HR policies in place. Someone needs to be assigned with that responsibility. Then there is a finance team. Again, somebody needs to be responsible for it. It can be the same person, but that needs to be clearly defined in writing. So again, we are living in a time and place. Documentation is so important, and I don't need to tell you all this because you all are in the sectors where documentation is so key. It's so very important. You never know who will ask you to present something as an evidence. So you do need to have those. And same thing goes for program team, a team that have time allocated to think about how we are doing programming. And if you're becoming a social enterprise, let us say, then you need to have processes in place to be a social enterprise, and how do you receive money and what are the mechanisms in place. So again, if you look at the Not-for-Profit Act, some of those guiding principles are already there. And in all cases, one thing needs to be so affirmed by all members and committed to is the goal and mission of the organization. So everything is somehow tied back to the goal and mission of the organization. Otherwise, again, it goes astray. So if you do all this well, you would see, and how do you know, how do you define if an organization is working well or not? They're agile, they are moving, they are growing. And an organization's mission is its reason for existing, its purpose, and where it is headed. They're focused on the mission. And they have diversified funding sources. I'm just saying in general, that is how it is. Otherwise, you're depending on one source. And if that one source gets removed, you are in trouble. And in some cases, that's how it is. And that is how some organizations or groups are funded. But just that while it is a strength, it is also a weakness. And good organizations are able to organize and inspire others. And in this current time, technology is huge. So we need to use technology to advance our goals. And listening and continuous listening is so important. When I say listening, it's not just listening to news of what happens outside, but listen to one another. When somebody comes with a different idea, before shutting it down, even if you don't agree with it, listen and see if there is anything that can be adopted or adapted. Because that's so important to be, again, in a healthy organization. There is place for listening, because people do have diverse voices, and a good organization is always learning, growing, and open to changes. And I would say, this is not a warning, but that is just if there is one thing that is constant in our sector, it is change, because we are constantly changing. And that's the only constant that is continuing, regardless of what happens. So we should be always ready for it. So differentiating roles and responsibilities, I touched upon it a little bit. Again, it is between operations and the board. So if I ask whose job is it to hire staff, I would say it is the ED's job, or whoever is responsible for hiring whichever staff. And setting the vision is board role. Setting the vision is board's role or management's role. It is the board's role. So it's collectively done. Approval of the annual budget. I'm just using some examples here. If that fall under ED or the board, it's always the board. If it was in another setting, I would have put this as a test so that you could actually answer it. And development of the HR policy, it is usually operations people in consultation with the board, does it, but the approval is done by the board. And I mentioned about signing of the check is a good example. You need to have those type of segregation of duties, so important, clearly defined early on. Otherwise, again, this can lead into trouble or unnecessary confusion and conflict. And develop KPIs. And that is something, key performance indicators, that's what I mean by KPI for people who are not used to, because metrics are important. If I'm going to give you $50,000, I need to know where that money is going and what is the impact of that money. And that is where, and also when you're setting up strategic goals or strategic planning for the organization, metrics always help if you are moving forward or not. And so, and how you get to that, sometimes it's so confusing and too big and too broad because it's so vague. It could be broken down into small activities. So this month you would hire, or you would have a volunteer communication person in place. You would have a newsletter developed in 3 months. So that is how you would go into that place. And again, decision-making process. What responsibilities falls under AD and what goes to the board. As I mentioned earlier, any type of hiring, any type of program-based decisions usually is under the ED or the CEO responsibility, and what goes to the board is policies, risk assessment. Again, if you're buying a property, if you are, let us say, sometimes when you get into fundraising, you would hear, I'm just using Chris just because I'm just seeing you right here. Chris is offering her service, her legal service as a lawyer to Ontario Heroes. And if she requests a receipt for it after, that is not allowed under CRA. And so although it is a gift of service and it is, a certain value is there, that is not allowed. Or let us say tomorrow, somebody decide to give you a house or an insurance. Those are the kind of things that are measurable. You can evaluate that, and then if there is a proper receipting system, you can receipt it. Again, CRI is very strict on those. Those are the kind of things the board needs to learn proper, or the person who is responsible for that. And that is where, again, people being assigned to certain duties that is a little bit more risky in nature, and if there is a group or a committee looking at it, would help long term. So that is a little bit of that, and here is some of the links that I mentioned. Again, as I said, it has very specific items under each of those, how somebody is being elected and what titles are being given and how you would go about it, etc. And so if you haven't developed bylaws yet, this Government of Canada's website has very specific direction to develop bylaws. And it's really good. I found that very useful. And this Peace Corps document on board development and responsibilities, it's a small document, very simple language. Again, have a read. It's available online. And then I would say the lawyers on this group should take care of the CCA and OCA. And on that note, I should stop. So it's 8:03. And we have quite a bit of time for question and answers. I will try to answer. I'm not promising that I know all the answers. But again, I wanted to congratulate you all to arrive at this place. You have really have done so much in such short time, and be really proud. Like in this time, this is so important. And some questions just for the board to consider when you are distinguishing between governance from management. Again, because I see this so often, becomes a conflict or place of tension in organization. When something comes, you need to discuss among yourselves. Is it big? Is it bigger than what could be a normal everyday occurrence? Is this decision or a conversation of the theme, is it about the future? How is it core to the mission? Is it a high-level policy decision needed to resolve a situation? Because that's how, by asking those questions, you would have very specific answers that would help you decide if it is your bucket of responsibility or is it the executive director or CEO's responsibility. And you should always watch out if there is any red flag when people are coming, or when the CEO coming and presenting, like, you see red flag, then ask, like, honest conversation always resolve issues from the beginning. And if you keep it a little fishy and wishy-washy, you land in trouble. And ask the CEO if they need your support and how so. Don't assume, ask. And the role of the management is very clear. It is the application or the implementation of the strategic goal, which is the executive management, finance. If there is marketing, it is marketing, human resources, day-to-day management. And I mentioned already, some organizations use the title, the CEO or ED, excuse me. It's all up to what the organization is comfortable with. So some of their common roles are like guiding and leading the leaders, implementing the company strategy, providing recommendations. So again, hear me, the providing recommendations to the board of directors is one of the, and then you get to discuss and decide if that's something you want to take further. And reporting feedback to the board of directors, because you're not there with the day-to-day function. You don't hear often what happens in the community or with the clients. So through the ED, you would hear that. And handling budgeting and finances is their job, but they will report back through the finance committee. On that note, I shall stop.
Dr. Agnes, thank you so much for this very informative session. I am informed that the Honorable MPP, Ms. Ruby Sahota, is here. So, and Martin did introduce Ms. Sahota. In fact, rather very elaborately introduced Ms. Sahota. So, but before I hand over the stage to Ms. Sahota, I just want to quickly say something. Dr. Agnes, the simplicity with which you actually presented such a complex topic of organizing or the running of a nonprofit organization, I have to commend you for that. Thank you so very much. It was indeed a very valuable session, and I'm sure all of our participants, whatever background they come from, have absolutely gained from this presentation. Now, over to you, Martin, to probably once again introduce Ms. Sahota. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Chris. That's very kind of you. So it's wonderful to have Ruby Sahota joining us now. She is the MP for Brampton North. I did mention the fact that she is born here in Toronto and raised in Brampton, and is an active member in a local community, and driven by her desire to make a big difference in Brampton North. So before entering politics, Ruby worked as a lawyer, practicing for 5 years in the areas of criminal law, civil litigation, and dispute resolution in both the public and private sectors, handling a wide range of complex files in international and national levels. Ruby holds a combined honors Bachelor of Arts in Political Science and Peace Studies from McMaster University, and a Juris Doctor degree with a concentration in litigation from Thomas M. Cooley Law School, where she was awarded the Blue Book Award in immigration law for achieving the highest GPA in her graduating class. So Ruby is a dedicated mother of a 7-year-old and a natural leader. She is passionate in engaging the youth and particularly obtaining their vote, and is experienced in galvanizing people towards a common goal. As an MP, Ruby is Vice Chair of the Genocide Prevention Group, co-chairs all the Party Entrepreneurs caucuses, and is involved with the Canada-India Friendship Group. Ruby is the Chair of the Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs, and is a member of the Standing Committee on Foreign Affairs and International Development. Ruby also served as Chair of the Federal Liberal Ontario Caucus and was previously a member of the Standing Committee on the Status of Women and the Special Committee for Electoral Reform. Outside of Ottawa, Ruby believes in being an accessible MP for her constituents, providing membership or mentorship to young people, and highlighting the diversity of Brampton North. So Ruby, welcome. The floor is yours.
Thanks. Thank you, Martin. I think you've read my whole website out. I wasn't expecting that. I have to provide something shorter next time for everyone, but I didn't want to interrupt you. You were so eloquent as well. Thank you. I really appreciate Ontario Heroes having me on this chat tonight. Your group has been doing tremendous work, and I can appreciate that you have recognized a gap in our system, and being able to connect people to the appropriate services is extremely important. And I've never realized really when you've been fortunate enough not to have to rely on so many of those services, you really don't realize until you get into a position such as the one I'm in now as a member of Parliament, trying to navigate systems and trying to help others in figuring out, many processes, whether it is healthcare at the provincial level or a federal issue, or even if it's just a pothole and it's a municipal issue, we're constantly having to figure out how we can best serve our constituents. And I feel the niche that you fill is really important, and one that I would like to learn even more about. The work that you do, the volunteering you do in the community is so important. And I know that the not-for-profit sector is really struggling right now through COVID-19. People are struggling, but those that support and help others are also equally struggling. So which can cause a bigger problem. And we already know that this pandemic is affecting some disproportionately. And you are also, well positioned and have been trying to help those. But when the organizations that are positioned to help those that are most vulnerable are also impacted disproportionately, and that's what we're seeing through this pandemic, then what worries us is that we have a real crisis on our hands. And as a federal government, we really have been having a lot of talks about how we're going to step in and how we can help our organizations on the ground and the not-for-profits succeed through this pandemic, because we need to work together to make sure that the vulnerabilities that this pandemic has really brought to light, ones that were always there and ones where from many levels we needed to do better. But I think the positive that's come out of this pandemic is the awareness that it has brought upon all levels and the areas that we need to work harder at. So I really do apologize for missing some of the seminar, but I am going to stay around for the rest of it and the questions and answers, so that I can, learn from the work that you are doing and hopefully contribute in some way, or at least be able to take what I learned back from this meeting and be able to talk about it with my other colleagues and through caucus meetings. So thank you really for having me on. It's day in and day out that people are walking through my office, and we're trying to figure out how to help support people, and building these relationships and bridges between organizations is really important. So I also would recommend that you reach out to everyone, whether it's something that you need or not from them, but you reach out to all your political representatives so that they know that the services you provide exist, because often we're not as aware as you would think about all of the small groups that are helping. And I was just talking to the status of women Minister Monsef the other day about how we need to do a better job at making sure that the local communities, the grassroots organizations that are out there serving, that we're getting down to them. And it's not just the really big organizations that are used to always receiving funding, and that we need to almost change the way the organizations and how we contribute to them, the criteria that's involved in a lot of these grants and funding processes, because and even studies that we've done. I was just talking earlier with somebody today too, that we need to make sure that we're funding studies that show the impacts that this pandemic, or even the few food shortages that we're feeling now, but the food shortage we had before, the gaps in our healthcare system that we've had in certain regions more so than for others, the people that are impacted sometimes disproportionately. The studies are not really done, and even when you talk to the hospitals, they're not collecting data in the way you would think that they would be collecting data. They're not. So they may be overall collecting data as to certain diseases and certain types of patients that they're seeing, but they're not collecting data as to the socioeconomic background of that person, the race, ethnicity of that person, the different, and that is why we're not able to get a proper social context of the situation. And so I'm really determined for us to do better when it comes to the proper research that needs to be done so that we can help cover these gaps. But in conclusion, I just want to say thanks for doing the work that you're already doing, because feeding that up to us will really help us do better so that we can support organizations like yourself, because the government isn't everywhere. The government can only help support groups like yours through funding in other ways so that you can do the good work that you're doing. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Ruby. Thank you for your kind and supportive words. It's very true that, as an organization just beginning, it is the hope to make a difference and to make those connections particularly with the vulnerable and those who are struggling to connect with services. We just listened also to Dr. Agnes Thomas, who gave a very informative and helpful overview of strategic planning organization. I just want to introduce you now to Chris Lemonell, who will moderate the questions and answers. So Chris is a barrister, solicitor, trained as an alternative dispute resolution professional and a notary public in Ontario. Immigrated to Canada in 2012, and through her perseverance was successfully called to the bar in 2015, and she has worked in different Canadian law firms. Chris graduated from the law school in 2008 and moved to London, England to pursue her postgraduate studies from the prestigious University College of London, UCLA. She brings with her a number of years of both international as well as domestic experience working as a lawyer in diverse fields of law such as human rights law, personal injury, immigration and refugee law, real estate law, and has practiced as a general civil litigation lawyer for most of her career. Passionate student who believes learning is a continuous journey, and she has several educational credentials and formal training, making her a truly trusted choice. Over the years, with her various employments, she furthered her studies and acquired postgraduate qualifications in public administration, counseling and psychotherapy. Chris is a passionate lawyer and believes in contributing to the community. She has in the past interned at the Office of the Commissioner of Housing Equity and has volunteered with the Refugee Law Office of Legal Aid Ontario, among others. She continues this passion currently. So, Chris, welcome. The floor is yours.
Oh, my dear Martin, thank you so much. I'm humbled and carried away. What do I say? You make me sound like a character, and like Ms. Sahota said, it's straight out from my website, but I totally appreciate what you're doing. Thank you so much, Martin. Amongst the many people who are out here, I'm sure I'm just a small speckle. They are the bigger picture. So I am absolutely honored to be part of this group. And I particularly take this opportunity to say that Ontario Heroes has now been officially legally registered as a non-profit organization. So we are very happy about that. So the first step we've achieved. And thanks to the vision and mission of our dear Praveen Varki, we are going to take this path forward. Once again, thank you, Dr. Agnes, for your really informative session. And honestly, as I mentioned earlier also, anybody could understand the complexities involved, because that's how simply you put it. And that in itself is a commendable work. The floor is open for anyone. And thank you, Ms. Sahota, again for joining us. If we have any questions, we do have some time. So yes, I have Mr. Arun Balakrishnan, who's asked. I'm going to pose this question to Dr. Agnes. Thank you. So Arun is asking, what would be some of the challenges a non-profit could face when it's initiated by a group of racialized individuals, or any tips to navigate those? Dr. Agnes.
That's a very good and politically charged question in this current climate. But I would say, whether racialized or non-racialized, when we take actions and when we have clearly set goals, thankfully in this country, what I am seeing is that there are ways to move forward, and there are people who are going to be supporting you and lifting you up. Again, resiliency and commitment and willingness to be doing the hard work, and when and where possible, stand up to say and speak, not just for yourself and for others, if there are experiences of difference and experiences of otherness that you experience in your social context, so that it can become not just a learning opportunity, but an advocacy opportunity as well. There are challenges. One thing I must say that in leadership, you do see a lot of racialized folks in the front lines, but you do not see a lot of people in leadership. And that is something we would have to work at, and what we can do to bring ourselves forward and how we get there. And that is where we have to think of this as a strategic and learning opportunity, and also be open to learning, because I do think learning goes a long way, and see where you can contribute, because even when you think you are invisible and nobody sees what you do, it is making a difference. That is my personal experience. And yes, there are a lot of challenges when you are striving towards leadership. But again, approach people who are interested and willing to invest in your growth, and you would see things change. Don't give up after one or two bad experience or negative experience. But again, there is such a great need for learning of other cultures, other perspectives, and that is an ongoing challenge, not just here. I mean, you're seeing this around the world, and you are seeing that in the news on an everyday basis. I stopped watching news recently because it's so discouraging. Yet, what you do every day, what you do now, as a group of individuals who believe in change and wants to make a difference, matters. And so as long as we have that strong faith and commitment, we will make a difference and we will get there. That's what I learned from my experience.
Thank you, Dr. Agnes. Do we have any other questions for our guest or our speaker? Please feel free to ask your questions in the chat box, or if you would like to ask the question, you could unmute yourself. We are 6 minutes away from closing today's session.
If I could use just 1 minute, just to comment on, like, here we have an opportunity and we are together. Turn on your videos and be present and make yourself visible, right? And speak up let people hear your voice. When we shy away, when we don't use our voices, somebody else will. And then you wonder why you are not at the table, why you are not asked for an opinion. Because we do, maybe culturally we are trained and molded to think, we don't need to be. And again, look at ourselves and ask, what do I need to do to make a difference? And what can I contribute when I'm and what am I learning from the other, right? Not everything that you agree, whether it is gender diversity or racial diversity or understanding of another culture or religious perspective, be open. And I think that will take us far. I get too passionate about it because me as a community developer and educator, this is learning and people really investing in that process is so important. I see transformation is possible when we are investing in learning.
Thank you so much, Dr. Agnes, and you are truly an inspiration to all of us. Thank you once again, Dr. Agnes, Ms. Ruby Sahota. I now hand over the floor to Martin to please introduce Mr. Praveen Varki and to close today's session. Thank you again.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining. Thanks for a wonderful evening, for all the discussion and information that's taken place. I'd like to hand this over now to Praveen Varki, who is the President and CEO of Ontario Heroes. Thank you, Praveen. Thanks for the opportunity of being part of this group. It's over to you.
Praveen, just a quick question. You may have covered this and I just missed it, but is there an income cutoff that you have to be below, or is there an income level you have to be below in order to get these services?
So right now we kept it open.
Mm-hmm.
So any individual, for example, we have some exclusion criteria too. So we provide, so we made it exclusion criteria, the individuals who are already admitted in a hospital, or a palliative care facility or inpatient rehabilitation, or already on a home and community like LINK services, or already on caseload with the Canadian mental health or any form of case management programs, we are excluding those populations because they are very well supported by the team. So we are just focusing more on the marginalized community and seniors and international students. So this is a focus, and because of volunteers, we can reach out within 24 hours time. So we are keeping a 2 to 3 days of window, but generally we can reach in within 1 to 2 days. So
will you be doing, because we used to do tax clinics in our office, will you, I noticed you had accountants listed.
Yeah.
Is that the purpose for the accountants, mainly tax clinics for seniors? And
that's right. For goal. And also that there are newcomers coming to Canada and they need a financial advice and file the taxes and apply the child benefits, and many other areas they need advice and support. And also first time when they join under an employer or get a job, they have a lot of questions, T1, T4 forms, how to fill this. So we're getting a lot of queries in that area too. So we'll connect with our accountant, chartered accountant, to get a free counseling on those matters too. Yes.
And how about, sorry, another question, just because I think you had so many professionals listed as volunteers, and I was reading up a little bit about you before I joined the call too. And so it's really amazing that all these professionals are volunteering their time pro bono and helping the cause. There are quite a lot of people who are sometimes find themselves not being able to get into legal aid because of the ultra low income requirement, but still are struggling because they may be a single mother with 3 or 4 kids, and and especially at the time where maybe you're going through a divorce or other issues, but they just don't qualify for the legal aid. And legal aid has been cut quite a bit, and it's very scary how many cuts have happened to legal aid recently. And so in the area of immigration and refugees, I would say even a lot of family case matters or domestic violence. And would you be taking on those people even though they're not, they don't qualify for legal aid because they make too much, but they still find themselves not being able to afford a lawyer?
So we right now the plan is provide a one-time session. Then we'll go from there, so we can navigate to other services available. In the community, there are other agencies also available. If it is an elder abuse issue, so we have a specialized agency, Advocacy Center for Elderly. If it's a disability matter, so we have a disability advocacy group available, and also in CLO available. So we can get additional support through them, or we can figure it out who is compassionate to provide a reasonable rate to these individuals. As an organization or a volunteer organization, we can basically advocate with this for this patient to get a reasonable fees or get this facilitation done. So that's our goal, basically provide the initial consultation, then provide the navigation and get right support on time, and find out the right people and partner with them to provide ongoing support.
I know the time's up, but I realized that Prakash had put a question. Praveen, if you don't mind, can I just quickly ask Dr. Agnes the question?
Yeah.
Could you explain briefly about how a council is formed, comprised of many smaller non-profits?
So we are part of many councils, with different people call it different names or networks of organizations, and often that is a great idea. So how partnerships among organization comes, let us say Ontario Heroes want to partner with CCS or another organization in the city. You would say we have a seniors program and we provide counseling. We see that you have settlement services. Can we partner? And when we have this people coming in, can one of your group come in? And so that becomes a way of partnership. And if it grows, and if number of organizations are doing those type of referrals or services, then there is a need for groups meeting. And so that is one type of partnerships or where organizations come together. Another kind is I'm part of what you call the Toronto Neighborhood Centers. So these are again organizations or groups in the city who have similar goals or vision, where we look at emerging themes or issues and address that together. Because in the collective, there is much more strength. Again, it's always aligned by the common values in which we serve or the vision in which we serve. Let us say one of the collective or common theme this year is that we want to serve the most marginalized among us. And then that itself is one central or thread that connects us. Then you look at in the continuum of care, what is my role and how do I envision? And so it could be frontline staff getting together, or it could be management staff getting together. It all depending on the need and the purpose. I hope that answered your question, Prakash. And there are a lot of groups in downtown and in all part of Toronto. And in the GTA, we have groups and organizations work together. And many funding organizations now even encourage you, strongly recommend that you do things in partnership when you apply for funding, because it's easier to measure and see continuity and sustainability.
Thank you for the information.
Thank you so much, Dr. Agnes. I think we can call it a night. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thank you, Martin. Thank you, Praveen. Thank you, Ms. Sahota, and each one of you whose presence did make a difference today. Thank you once again, and have a good night.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you, everyone. Good to be here, and thank you, and nice meeting you, Ms. Sahota. And thanks for moderating, Chris.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Likewise, Dr. Agnes, thank you so much.
Good night.
Thank
Good
you,
night.
Martin. Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Keep up the great work, Praveen. This is an amazing start. I know, at the start things are tough, but you have a fantastic idea and a fantastic group around you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
And let me know if you need something.
Definitely. We'll reach out to your office. Thank you so
Thank you.
much. Thanks for joining us today.
Sorry, I had to join a little late today.
No problem. You joined on perfect time. So,
Yeah, thank you.
thank you. Good night.